Welcome back, everyone. This panel session is the last panel for the day, or the first and the last panel for the day. It's about letting go with Leganto, and I'd like to introduce the panellists. Meredith Mooi is Systems and Technologies Manager, Information Services at the University of the Sunshine Coast Library. She has worked in library systems for 20 years, joining USC Library in 2006 as Library Systems Coordinator. Meredith led the implementation project for ALMA and Primo in 2015, which was extended to include ALMA Digital and Leganto in 2016. Meredith has recently taken on a broader role responsible for systems across the Information Services branch, library, records and research repository. She has a keen interest in knowledge management, project management and shared leadership to facilitate systems innovation and change. Tracey Donelly is Manager for Digital Discovery and Services at Western Sydney University Library, where she has developed innovative and responsive services in the area of digital resource delivery. She started her library career in 1995 and is currently enrolled in a Masters of Business Administration. She has worked in project-based roles at a university-wide level, including the implementation of Turnitin and Grademark. Tracey has experience in utilising technologies to improve services and has recently coordinated the Leganto project. Kerry Bedford is the Manager of Academic Services for Science, Engineering and Medicine in the UNSW Library. The Academic Services team collaborate with academic staff and students to develop and implement services that support research, learning and teaching at UNSW. Prior to this role, Kerry was the Manager of the Berwick and Peninsula Libraries at Monash University. She has also worked as the Senior Librarian at the Hargrave Andrew Library at Monash University, a Public Services Librarian at Schaefer Library in Union College in upstate New York, the Manager of Research and Learning Services at Curtin University Library, a Faculty Librarian at Curtin University Library, and a Reference Librarian at the University of Western Australia Library. Linda Sheedy is Coordinator Collection Services at Curtin University Library since 2014. She has worked at Curtin Library since 1990 in many roles, including Library Assistant and Library Technician. She has been Curtin Library's Project Manager for Leganto implementation since 2015 and is a member of the IGLU Leganto Product Working Group.
I was going to start off this panel presentation because USC is actually still part in our pilot phase. Just to give you some context. Good. We have 2 faculties, we have 10 schools, 5 campuses and counting, so a very small university, but we're actually growing rapidly. As Sue mentioned, we implemented ALMA and Primo in December 2015, and then in 2016 ALMA Digital and Leganto came up as opportunities. So we don't have any previous reading list technologies, and we very much saw Leganto and ALMA Digital as opportunity for us. Like everyone, we've managed course reserve via the library system for quite some number of years. And at the moment, our academics are completing an online form for course reserve requests. It's very tedious and admin intensive, so we're looking for a replacement and we're hoping that Leganto can fill that gap. Very much the librarians that have been involved in course reserve, but not for some years. So again, we're hoping that Leganto is going to open up opportunities for them, and we're hoping it's going to expand the library's involvement in curriculum development. I'm very probably ashamed to say that as a university we still produce printed books of readings for students, and that's another thing that we really want to let go of by implementing Leganto. There's a very small project team for the implementation of Leganto. It's basically myself and another librarian as part of our substantive role to pick that up as well. So I really just want to cover our approach to the pilot, what we've learned so far, and the questions and considerations that have come up. So what's driving our decisions? So I guess the car that we're driving is compliance, admin and reporting. So we really want to be prepared for any move away from CAL surveys to a reporting model. And we also want to improve and streamline the processes, especially, as I said, for the academics, and make it a much easier, efficient way for them to get the course reserve materials that they need. And again, it's also providing efficiencies for library staff in terms of our processing. And the third thing is to improve the student experience. So finally, letting go is really two things for us: moving away from the printed books of readings and changing library staff mindsets that Leganto is just still course reserve, because it's much more than that. So in terms of getting started with our pilot, we started working with Ex Libris in April 2016 to implement Leganto, so they did the initial setup. We then worked with our IT department to implement the integration in our test environments, Test Blackboard, Test ALMA, Test Leganto, to make sure it all worked. That was actually quite straightforward. And then that had allowed us to, I guess, provide access to a group of academics to basically let them play in that sandbox environment. From there, we gave them a checklist or a worksheet just to work through, because really what we're wanting to find out in our pilot is test and play with everything to see what would work, what functionality is going to be of use. Let's play with it all. So it was very much playtime in the sandbox. Most of those academics found it very intuitive to use. We didn't find that we needed to do a lot of training with them. The checklist sheet that we gave them, the worksheet, was sufficient for them to get started. We then embarked on the parallel approach with communications. Once we knew that we had everything set up in the test environment, we identified 2 courses that were live, and this was probably around October, and we were able to approach the academics and say, look, can we switch these on in your 2 courses in the live environment? So they allowed us to do that. The promotion that we've done has gone to Academic Board, Learning and Teaching Week. The librarians have gone to the faculties and schools, promoted it as much as possible. And we've done it as a pilot to say, hey, it's something new that the library's looking at, and do you want to be a part of it? So from that process, we've identified academics who are always keen to try new technology, and I think they're the people who you need to get on board first. We also wanted to identify courses that would give us the most constructive feedback. So obviously we've targeted some first-year courses with high enrolments. But in saying that, you also want to look at, well, how does Leganto fit for second and third year courses? Is it something that's going to be of use for those cohorts? So after the first round of communication promotion, the liaison librarians compiled a list of academics who were keen to get on board. We had a lot of uptake from our social sciences area, but I'll jump ahead a bit. Throughout the pilot this semester, we've actually had to provide more support for them than we expected. And I think the other thing with academics is identify those who are going to be able to cope with troubleshooting and things that actually go wrong in their live course. And if they can deal with that and work with you, it's a much less stressful situation. The other thing that we did is very much target student feedback from the beginning, and we've just done that with a simple online form. It asked 3 questions: what did you like, what did you dislike, and what it would be good if. So that gave them a bit of a option to just add comments. So where we are now, we're at nearly at the end of the first semester of our first pilot of 11 courses. We launched the student feedback online form in week 4, and we've actually got a good chunk of responses from them that range. It was a lot of very considered feedback from students. It wasn't just, oh yeah, it's good, don't care, whatever. As I said, we've had that situation where we've had to troubleshoot quite a number of issues as we've gone along. It's been a learning, testing and very much an evolving situation, both for library staff and for academics. Some academics are trialling the tags we created, so we have required reading, optional reading, moved to reserve. Some have set out their lists based on the construct of their Blackboard course, so it's week by week. Others have set it out by module, and again, we've just given them a free-for-all. Put it together however would work for you, because we're wanting to see different approaches to it to get that idea of how we might, not so much mandate, but how we might roll it out going forward from 2018. What we've found from the students that there's been very little use of comments or likes or tags or anything like that. Very few of them seem to have found the little tick that says, yep, read it. What that's informed us is we'll probably have to do some kind of instruction guides for students about getting the most out of your Leganto reading list. We're also testing the autocomplete configurations within ALMA, so you can set up for ebooks, for example, within your collection that automatically gets completed as a citation because you don't need to do any processing with it. We have discovered some issues with electronic resources, that the links to journal articles sometimes don't work, which is very frustrating because it's sophisticated enough to say covered by your library. Click on a link and it doesn't work. So we're exploring that with Ex Libris as well. Our defined whitelist, which can also be set up for sites that you want to set through as completed. We have a whitelist. You can set them up as blacklists, and there's been a bit of discussion with my colleagues up here which way the best way to go. At the moment, we've got a whitelist of YouTube and TED Talks, so if there's a citation for that, it's complete. We don't need to process it. In terms of support for workflow, as I said, we initially aimed to try and develop those workflows at the same time as the academic support list creation. Probably we've worked out that that was taking on a little too much, and we had to scale that back because we found some of the academics needed more support in the creation of their lists. So I was having to support the librarians supporting the academics, and therefore I wasn't able to do as much investigation of the library workflows, and particularly because there's a lot of work still being done with Ex Libris in terms of the copyright compliance with the Australian copyright, the digitisation requests. We haven't gone ahead with any of those workflows and hadn't made a decision on those yet. So what we've learned, students love it mostly, that's from our feedback. So that's been invaluable. As I said, some of the functionality they say is missing is actually there, so we'll be putting instruction guides together for them. Most of the challenging academics that we have are actually on board with it. We're probably in a honeymoon period during the pilot that it's quite contagious, so that the academics are contacting their colleagues and saying, hey, you need to get into this pilot group with the Leganto. Whether that tapers off and we get into the same area as everyone else is that academics go, no, it's not my job, it's admin, we're not going to do it, we don't know yet. So in terms of letting go, one of the big things, as I mentioned, is moving the library staff mindset away from the fact that this is just course reserve, because all sorts of citation resources can be added to the Leganto lists. And as I mentioned, journal article links sometimes don't work, so we need to work out who is actually going to be responsible for doing those roles. So questions and considerations where we are at the moment is how much can we expect the academics to do? What will a librarian's role be? How do we implement the copyright digitisation workflows? Who's going to be responsible for copyright? It may be that the library is first in the basics, and then we have copyright advisory people. We aren't sure how we're going to roll out Leganto in 2018. It may be that we target first-year courses. Whether there's going to be a mandate across the university that Leganto reading lists are going to be used from now on. And our big aim is to move away from printed books of readings. So the known issues I've touched upon, the ALMA digital workflows in terms of digitisation and copyright haven't been, I guess, worked through yet. So we haven't gone ahead with any of, I guess, the library processing workflows at the moment until they're decided. There is issues adding second chapters via digitisation requests, and Leganto at the moment only gives you a link to the first one, so it's a bit of a problem. In Primo, when you've added citations via or digital inventory via Leganto digitisation requests actually display view online and they look like the ebook, so it's going to be a bit of an issue for users. And you can't suppress digital inventory records, so that's not the bib record, it's the digital representation, which is a bit of a annoying thing. So one last slide, where we're heading from now is I've already set up the new courses for our second semester pilot, given there's a lot that we still need to learn and still need to test and evaluate, that we're just going to extend the pilot this year and hopefully go live in 2018. We also need to work with IT to build the course loader integration, so that's getting the course data from our enrolment system. And again, the copyright digitisation request workflow is one of our big things, but I plan to actually collate feedback from the academics in a more formal sense, like we have with the students as well, to inform where we're going. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so for Western Sydney University, we've been providing a listing of linked resources from within the LMS since 2010, which was delivered via open source software. Typically, academic staff at our institution are actively discouraged from doing any admin work. So the notion of getting academics to update their own list via Leganto would have been perceived as pushing this work back to the schools, particularly when the library has already established a robust, successful service. At the same time, politically, the university was participating in an early voluntary redundancy scheme, and in play there were restructures for the professional staff within the schools. So again, politically, it would have been best. It's best to keep this service running as business as usual. Additionally, in policy, the library has to receive the learning guide, as we also host these documents for the university. So in practice, when we receive the learning guide, we strip out the reading list and we automatically create a reading list on receipt and also include the later editions, plus also create the reserve requests. At this stage, client services are not part of the workflow, however, are expected to discuss new content inclusions before the learning guides are submitted into the library. All right, so in terms of our organisational structure, due to our distribution environment, we have a discrete team that performs this work in information resources, and then they reside within the digital discovery team. As the digital format for materials, the preferred method of providing access, this has provided a good fit for the team, as we can quickly resolve issues with packages or resource availability as should problems arise. Again, the digital discovery team have a strong working relationship with the staff that manage Blackboard for our university. So we're actually well placed in terms of troubleshooting problems should they arise in the Blackboard. So in terms of the ReadingsDirect, that's what we call our team that do all the processing for readings. We only have 3 full-time staff. As we've chosen not to get academics to populate their own readings into Leganto, our staff create the list on behalf of the learning guide as submitted to the library. It's also important to note that all teams and information resources do assist in Leganto list creation during peak times. In most instances, we have been granted access to the LMS at the school level. And additionally, outside of that, we do also have to seek permission to add links to the unit level. So as we've been performing this task for over 7 years, it's widely accepted that the library will go in and add a reading list to the unit site. And this also includes the documents that require copyright clearance. So in terms of managing it, we still use Google spreadsheets to track all learning guide submissions, list creations, and also those lists that have been embedded into the Blackboard unit site. As we've been progressing with the Leganto project, we are switching out our old reading list link and replacing with the LTI tool. So with the spring session forthcoming, Leganto has already afforded productivity gains as we have already delivered most of our units for this session this year, and therefore we don't need to require or seek Blackboard access as the LTI link is already in place. And that was actually one of the slowest parts of our workflow, is seeking permission to the view site, or that's what we call it, to put in the reading list link. So in terms of our workflow principles, the two underpinning factors are with policy and centralisation. The thing to remember as well, that with the previous leadership group, they had a strong interest in cognitive load, which is the portion of memory that remembers new information in short time scales, and believed, this happened 7 years ago, and believed that students would benefit greatly if the reading list was linked to the resource and embedded at the point of need, so therefore not adding unnecessary demands to a student's time and basically enhancing the overall learning experience. So to this end, the library was able to put in policy a compulsory requirement of submitting the learning guide or the reading list into to the library. Again, by having this in policy, it means that the student experience is consistent across all units. All right, so in terms of the Leganto reading list process, it hasn't actually deviated too much from our former process with our open source software. So as you can see here, the library, when we receive the learning guide, it's the ReadingsDirect team that produces the reading list first. And then they reassign that list to the acquisitions team, and then they go through and they will do all the new ordering and also update the new additions. So they'll update the new additions directly on the Leganto list. However, they will put in the notes field for items that are still on document delivery or waiting to be scanned, or items that are still yet to be received on order. So again, also you can see that we also have a process in place for notifying the academics on when their reading list is available and whether they approve it or not. So back to the Leganto project. As the reading list service is essentially for us a new look and feel, and really the service itself remains unchanged, we piloted this for summer 2016. As a consequence, we had a very short lead time in establishing the LTI within Blackboard. So as the digital discovery team, we have a strong working relationship with IT services, and myself having access to Blackboard staging site and ALMA sandbox, we were able to determine the user ID field name and course code field name from the debug reports relatively painlessly. Once we had established and had a successful connection in staging, we needed to seek approval to move the LTI from staging to Blackboard production. And it was very important to get this achieved as a minor change to the pipeline process. And actually have IT consider this as business as usual, because if they didn't, they would have created a separate project, and it would have taken a lot longer to get this online. So again, with Course Loader, we actually haven't integrated with Course Loader because it would have delayed the process even further. And at the same time, the student information unit, we're in the process of choosing a new system. We're currently with Callista, but we're just waiting for them to choose their new system, and then we will hope to integrate with them. Okay, so in terms of how we work with the course codes and ALMA, fortunately for us, we actually use the course codes from the previous workflow. So we actually had a lot of the course headers already in the system. So again, it's all part of our normal workflow. However, there are exceptions. So for those units who are less than 6 digits or we have never had a course header created before, we actually have to go into the Blackboard unit first and turn on the LTI tool to determine what the course code is, and then we create the course header based on that. In terms of copyright, we do actually have an in-house system that manages copyright for chapter limits really well, and so we actually haven't done anything with the copyright module. At this stage, we are still uploading the chapters to our server, and then we use that URL and we put it in as a Leganto record as a non-repository item, and it seems to be working quite well. So in terms of the ALMA configurations that we have used or we've chosen not to use, and against our existing workflows, we found that work orders weren't necessarily a good fit for reassigning this work between ReadingsDirect and acquisition staff. So we just reassigned these lists against the different processing departments. So we have a processing department for ReadingsDirect and another one for acquisitions. So as I said earlier, when we reassigned the lists, we use the notes field to include all that extra information, such as new items on order or or pending document delivery requests. So in terms of notifying the academics for when the list is available, we are still notifying via email, and we're tracking this via Google Docs. We actually haven't been able to use the notification letters or emails, as we can't embed the reading list permalink into the letters or into the emails, as you need another authentication layer for the links to work outside of the LMS. So in terms of executing the rollout, so over the summer period, we had a pilot of 45 lists or 45 units that used the service. And again, we were very clear in making sure that we just communicated this as a new look and feel, and that the service remained unchanged. So in terms of ReadingsDirect, the only changed bit of the service, I suppose, is that in our old system, we used to present the reading list in the correct citation format, but obviously with Leganto we couldn't do that. So we had to be very clear with those academics that it's no longer presented in a particular style. There was some pushback from academics, but but ultimately it was widely accepted and received quite well. So in terms of at this point, so we've done our pilot and we've also been fully implemented for the autumn session. At this stage, we've actually created over 1,000 lists. We have over 20,000 citations added to the system, and it's incurred over 500,000 reading list views. So the usage has been very favourable at this stage. So in terms of 2017 and beyond, so for the known issues, we've had feedback in terms of the chapter's metadata. It has been difficult for students and staff sometimes to locate the chapters from within a Leganto list. Obviously for the stuff that's coming from the ALMA repository, again, what we're selling to people is that, use the search function. Again, there is a known issue in terms of dealing with different reading lists for the same unit over a concurrent sessions. At this point, the workaround is that we're still using our old system in that instance. So you'll have the 2 units, but one is in the old system and another one is in Leganto. The other thing that we uncovered is that not all casual staff are included in the staff loads that go into ALMA. So therefore, there is a lot of, for the first 2 weeks of session, you'll have a whole series of casual academics that will incur a 400 unknown user ID error. And this is mainly because there's an identity management issue coming from IT, which is not controlled by the library. So to this end, as you know, it requires an active ALMA record for it to authenticate properly into Blackboard. So into that end, we need to get casual academics to present to the library, show their casual contract, and then we'll create an ALMA record based on their contract. And then once they've got an active ALMA record, it works as beautiful as it should. So in terms of the future, at this point, we're ensuring that the legacy links from our old system are removed from Blackboard sites and replaced with the new LTI tool. Again, we're looking at copyright functionality in Q3. And again, when student information systems have implemented their new system, we'll establish course loader there. Lastly, the one thing that we'll be looking at relatively soon is establishing a SAMIL integration profile so we can start using the permalinks outside of the Leganto list. So therefore, we'll be using those permalinks in the email notifications to academics. So because primarily we use that as a way of ensuring that the academics are happy and approve the reading list. So that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, so what Sue mentioned in the introduction is that I'm Manager of Academic Services at University of New South Wales, and we're the people who deal with the academic staff and the students. So my presentation is going to be very different, and it's a very front of house perspective on a Leganto implementation. So what makes UNSW special? Well, to steal something from our hosts, we're large and we're complicated. And we are very decentralised. So there are lots of local practices happening out in the schools and faculties. There's no one standard way of doing things, and that will come back as I talk about things through this presentation. The other thing about UNSW is that the library has managed to establish a self-service model for our academic staff and our students. So, for example, the library manages the university's research reporting system, Symplectic, but it's the academic staff who are responsible for making sure that their publications are in that system, that they're accurate and they're up to date. So we have a completely different culture from Western Sydney, where there is a very clear expectation for some things that academics can do things themselves. Another thing in the environment around implementation is that we had a local champion. Kath Ellis, who's our Associate Dean for Education for the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, came from a small university in the UK that had created its own version of something like Leganto. So she wanted a reading place where the students could go and get their readings, and then they could interact with each other's and the readings and comment. And so she was actually talking to us about whether the library could do something like this. And also in the environment was that the university is starting to move to a blended learning model. So easy access to creating reading lists and online course materials is obviously part of that model. No, wrong way. So we were a development partner with Ex Libris at the beginning of 2016, and we ran our pilots were managed by 3 units within the library. So the Academic Services unit brought their expertise in working with academic staff to the project. The Electronic Resources unit were the experts in managing our reading lists and our physical high use material. And our library application support unit had the expertise in managing the systems. So we had the 3 units working together on the project. And I don't think this makes us unique. This probably makes us typical, that we didn't have any extra staff to manage the rollout. So we did a pilot in we did a couple of pilots in 2016. In semester 1, we piloted Leganto mainly with Faculty of Arts and Social Science academics, and we ended up with 10 published lists. And then we surveyed the academics who were involved in that pilot and got lots of positive feedback. One of my favourites was an academic who told us that Leganto would actually get them to use Moodle. The other one was that we had academics coming to us asking if they could use Leganto because their colleague had used it in the semester 1 pilot and their colleague had said great things about it. So we took that as a positive sign, but we were a bit cautious. So we trialled it again in semester 2, broadened the scope of the trial, got a few other faculties involved, and ended up with 23 published lists. Then we used Leganto for our summer courses at UNSW, and our summer courses we don't have very many of them, so we tried that with the 40 lists. So based on that, we thought we would go to Leganto in 2017. And so we had to get the word out. So this is where academic services come to the fore with these sorts of things. So we, being librarians, we thought, I know, we'll do a web page. So we put some things up on the web page, kept it fairly simple and promotional in tone. So rather than going through everything that could possibly need to be done and everything that could possibly go wrong, we basically have it as a tone of it's simple. All you have to do is this, this and this, and your reading list is ready for your students. In response to some feedback this semester, we've actually added a link to a library guide that has a bit more detail because the academics said to us, yes, it is simple, but we only use it twice a year. So having that detailed information as an option is really good. We used our outreach librarians who work with the academic staff, and they were really our main promoters. So they went to school meetings and faculty meetings and talked about Leganto, demonstrated Leganto, and then as a follow-up they met with small groups of academic staff or individual academics and got them started in creating their lists. And what we found was that most academics, you'd spend 10 or 15 minutes with an individual or a small group and they'd go, we've got it, that's easy, thanks, we'll get back to you if we've got any questions. So from the academics' point of view, it really was quite simple to get started and to get up and running. We had our local champion, so Kath Ellis, and that was really good at that senior level across the university. So she could talk to the other Associate Deans of Education and promote, she could be a champion at that level for Leganto, and also with the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Education and his staff. Getting the word out at those senior levels was really helpful. As I said, UNSW is going through a blended learning change, and part of that is that they're redesigning 666 courses over the next 5 years to turn them into blended learning courses. And part of that process is we have educational designers creating a Moodle template which people can then use to slot this information for these new courses. So we got Leganto as part of that template. So it just becomes normalised. It's what you do when you're doing a course. And of course we got ourselves invited to every learning and teaching committee on campus that we could possibly find. So a lot of it was just talking about Leganto until absolutely everybody was sick of it. And then if we had music, I'd cue the song from Frozen, but we let it go. And here's the graph. So, as I said, we went from a very small-scale trial to a university-wide rollout. And this is where the large and complicated came back to bite us. Because I think what we've found is Leganto has really been designed with the concept that you've got an individual academic who's teaching 2 or 3 courses a semester and getting their information and reading lists together in Moodle. And they do that, and Leganto works perfectly in that situation. We have lots of different practices across campuses that got unearthed when we rolled it out on a larger scale. One of the most common is that you're going to have professional staff managing reading lists, sometimes for large numbers of courses. So for the Australian Graduate School of Management, one professional staff member looked after 80 courses and the reading lists for those 80 courses. We found that although we officially have semesters, we have a lot of non-standard teaching periods, and how that works in Moodle and how it works in Leganto, and timing is also very complicated. So you've got sessional staff who are given the material to teach, usually on about day 3 of semester when they start work. So you have all these complications that don't fit the conceptual model behind Leganto. And they can all be solved and worked through, but they do have to be worked through. So, what would I do differently? First of all, don't do what I did and have 2 small-scale trials and a big rollout. I'd suggest 1 or 2 faculties and see what problems come out in a larger scale trial. The other 2 things are what I call the anti-librarian things, because we're always focused on client service and being helpful. And what we found is that we were really anxious to make the trial work, and we put a lot of effort into working with the academics in the trial. And that came back against us when we rolled out university-wide, because little problems that happened during the trial, we'd get in touch with the person and say, oh, by the way, this has happened, but don't worry about it, this is the fix or whatever. In our model, academics really need to just check and make sure everything's working. And so we had our biggest supporters and our biggest advocates getting upset because something wasn't working because we hadn't told them. So we really, if you're doing something like that, you really need to think about what your implementation model is down the track so you don't set up false expectations. And the other thing, which is again a very librarian thing, we don't want to be a bother. So when we did the trials, we didn't pester the Moodle administrators very much. I'd say pester them right from the beginning. This is a big deal. It's going to make a big difference. There is something to see here, and you need to let them know that that's what you're planning and trialling. And that way, some of those issues that we got when we rolled it out university-wide may have been addressed beforehand. So what are we doing? Well, we're still refining and reiterating workflows. That is still very much a work in process, especially with Alison's team in electronic resources and things like copyright and things that I won't go into detail about. We're looking at analytics. We're trying to figure out what the analytics are telling us, what we want to measure, what story we want to tell, those sorts of things. So we in fact have a very small working group who are looking at that, because there's all sorts of things that we can get out of Leganto, but it's really why we're getting these stats. What are we reporting on and to who? One of the things is we keep updating our communication plan across the university, especially with semester 2 coming up. How are we getting the information about rolling courses over, making sure the word gets out across the university. And we have a few projects that we're giving particular attention to. So Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, what is happening at UNSW is that we are going to trimesters in 2019, and the Associate Dean Education in preparation for that wants every course redesigned and Leganto put in there. So that's one project. We're working with the Australian Graduate School of Management on their non-standard teaching periods, and we're starting to talk to the Faculty of Medicine because, again, they have non-standard teaching periods and lots of professional staff managing. Okay. No? No? Yep. Thank you.
Hello. So, what made Curtin unique, or what we thought made us special, we thought we had a very small implementation team, and we met our colleagues and realised that everybody got a small implementation team. But it was true, it's very small. It was a large university rollout, and our service is fully mainstream, so we're not testing, we're not piloting, it just is a service that is just delivered at our university. It's a technical exercise, so Collection access is part of the technical services, not inquiry services or learning services. And it's also about centralised copyright management. So our eReserve legacy system has always been about managing copyright, and the fact that it could be leveraged as a reading list service for students was, quite frankly, probably a bonus. So what we had to let go of was our very successful and robust legacy system that we could completely control. So, oh no. There we go, I'm back. So, because I'm only working from the screen, if I don't have it, we're all in trouble. So this was our project team's structure. We had a project sponsor because one of the things that greenlighted Leganto across the university was the fact that it was bundled in with a curriculum management project, whereby the university was overhauling all of its curriculum management, including things like taking out Student 1 and putting in Akari. So we were part of that. So we instantaneously had university support, Blackboard support, all that support. Project manager, that's me. Also had access to a very small amount of time from a technical librarian who does all my Salesforce cases and works out how functionality works. I have expert advice from IT and copyright, fortunately both housed within the library. I have my collection access team who process our resources. We have 1.5 full-time staff members, yes, not including me. So 3 other people, 1.5. And we had to cover 4 faculties, more than 39 teaching areas, 38,000 full-time equivalent students, 705 teaching staff, and multiple campuses and international campuses. So that's what we needed to, this amount of people needed to achieve that outcome. So this workflow is kind of looking at it a little bit different. Our academics start everything. They need to go into a system that is an in-house curtain system called OLAS and basically summon a Blackboard instance into being. So they'll just go in and fill it in with some information that looks good to them. And that is what gets picked up by the Leganto course loader via API. So there's course loader and there's course loader via API. We load via API and that populates the course level in ALMA course reserves. And then on the other side, the academic is then obviously coming into Blackboard, going into Leganto, doing their creation and curation of their reading list, which is transferred back to ALMA as a reading list attaching itself to a course in real time, which is one of the things we love about Leganto. And library staff are processing the reading lists in ALMA. Students are consuming Leganto via Blackboard. So I'm not really going to talk much about library staff process at this point. At the moment, our back end looks exactly like what we had done in the past. It's all about user interface for us at the moment. So what's driving our decisions? Well, we do think reading list content is a responsibility of the academic who is creating that course to choose, select, create the context and arrange in order the readings the way they want them. Copyright management and reporting is centralised to the library, but it is the academic's responsibility to report all use of Part 5B materials. And so therefore the academic must use the Leganto user interface, and we will not create anything for them. So library staff are doing the copyright management, we're doing the acquisition of all of their resources and providing the student access. So if you think about, I think staff mentioned autocomplete, so if you haven't seen the workflow before, a citation will come in, it'll be have a status of being ready for processing, and the student can't actually access the resource behind that citation until that citation is changed to complete. So it's really critical for us that that status change is being made promptly. That's where we get most of our dissatisfaction if we don't release the resources in good time. especially if there's nothing wrong with the resource in the first place. Because autocomplete is a bit of an art form, and not everything autocompletes the way it should necessarily. So, configuration that we don't use. We're not using the notification system. From our perspective, and I haven't checked with my colleagues, we think notifications have been bundled to staff and students. So you can't just email staff about changes in reading lists. It's going out to everybody. And we don't really want to email our students about anything, actually. We don't. As a library, we're not really authorised to have communications like that with students. So we don't really use the email system, although some of the functionality in that would be handy to automatically go out. We don't really looking at copyright and digitisation workflows yet, partly because we need to move our legacy system to ALMA D, and also because with the renegotiations of the Part 5B copyright licences at the end of the year, we don't actually really know what our copyright requirements will be, and we don't really want to put anything into ALMA or generate fields and things until we know what it is we're actually doing. ALMA D, we're still learning about ALMA D. We've never used it at Curtin before, so big learning curve for us there. Don't really use ALMA Analytics either, not the ones for student usage. We're still trying to work out what those measures mean and how we're going to use them, so we've not put much time into actually getting that happening. We do use purchase requests though, so my staff are looking at things that need to be ordered and pushing that through using the purchase request functionality in ALMA into a work task list for the acquisitions team to do the ordering, and that kind of integration is the kind of thing that we're looking for in terms of ALMA gains from Leganto, getting seamless functionality being able to move things around without pulling them in and out of ALMA. We do uploaded files, so not everybody does, but we let our staff give us uploaded files so that they resist the urge to put them into Blackboard. So consequently, I get a lot of my own material back, my e-reserve documents and our electronic books that they've had uploaded into Blackboard for who knows how long. But we think that this is a way of encouraging them to take that material out of Blackboard, but it generates a lot of work for us. And whitelists, blacklists, no one really knows. Currently white, we're talking about going black. It's all about, for us, trying to get that auto-complete level percentage up as high as possible. So we're really looking at Leganto as an additional staff member to lift the load off staff to get those citations open. So we've got to, because we really did get caught out. 48 hours before we went to semester one, we had over 4,000 citations that weren't complete. And we had to ask Ex Libris as a favour to auto-complete all of those records for us, because if we'd gone into semester with a huge proportion of stuff uncompleted and inaccessible to students, we would have had a public relations nightmare on our hands. So we really need to get into that. What is going on with autocomplete? How can we get it up? Will a black list be better than a white list? We don't know. We might go backwards and forwards for a long time, but there's certainly something we can probably talk to Ex Libris about as well. Some of it's about algorithms and things. So executing our rollout, we're early adopters in 2015. So that was obviously an implementation, LTI set up in Blackboard deal year. Year 2, we did some configuration, we did some pilot. And year 3, we kind of just looked at each other and said, well, what are we going to do? We can't just keep working on functionality and trying to make this as perfect as possible, because monthly rollouts mean that you're going to get new functionality all the time. And so it was either decommission the legacy system at the end of semester 2 last year, so that they had summer to create the new reading lists, or wait another year. We simply couldn't wait. So we just simply did the opposite to some of my colleagues, and we just threw the whole system at the academics and just went, this is the new system, and go get into it. And it really did feel like that. So these were our user statistics. We obviously, January 2016, started at 0. The 3rd of January 2017, we had over 18,000 users in the system. And we think overall that was pretty successful. We haven't run any student surveys and we haven't heard from a single student. We believe in good faith that means that they're just using it, that it's working for them, that they're just getting the resources that they need. It's more about working with the academics for us. It takes me 45 minutes to do one face-to-face consultation with each academic. I might be trying to feed them too much stuff, I'm not sure, but a lot of time goes into that, and training, group training as well. So where is our business not usual? We didn't know, although in some ways we suspected, but we didn't know just how unaligned what we were providing for learning and teaching through our course reserve system was compared to what people were actually using for learning and teaching. And so that triggered a lot of additional licensing questions for us, and a lot of hosting concerns. So were we going to pursue extra licenses that we'd never tried to get out of publishers and vendors and people before? Were we going to do it at a per unit level, which we've never done before? And if we did, where were we going to host it so that we could look after it? And these are actually questions we haven't really answered yet. So this is going to be a new area for us to have a look at. Metadata control, I think we've mentioned. We were in our legacy system cataloguing everything. So we could control all the cataloguing. It was completely standard for every single thing that we were providing. Now we just get whatever is coming from the vendor. So it's, I'd really like to see that lift. I'd like to see that better, that what's coming through is more standard, looks more normal. And of course, copyright and digitisation. It's part of the reason why we're in the Leganto game, and will be quite an interesting experience for us. So going forward, copyright management will continue to be an issue. Reading list management, we'll need to continue working on that because we're going into semester 2, so we've got to go through a migration like we went through in semester 1 to get the semester 2 academics on board, and eventually the bits of the legacy system that can still be viewed in Leganto by academics will need to be removed. We'll need a new website. Our current website is pilot, so that worked for pilot people, but it's not really covering the mainstream needs. We'll need to redo that. We'll need to deliver more training, and we'll need to continue to work on our library processes. And that's it. I'm handing over to Sue.
Hi, I was just wondering, with liaising with the LMS teams at your universities, how much technical requirement was there for them to be involved with this project? Like in terms of implementing Leganto, how much did you have to get the actual Blackboard people to do, or was it?
Oh, look, for them it was just really, if you added up all the time, it was really, oh, sorry, closer? Yeah, I'm not sure it's on. Ah, it's okay. I think it's working now, yeah. In terms of our scenario, if you added up all the hours, it would have just really been about a day's work. It was in their best interest actually to actually make this available, because we didn't actually have to convince them that much at all. Like in terms of the IT, this particular team that looks after Blackboard, you know, we have a pretty good working relationship, so they're like, yeah, we'll give it a crack. But in terms of actually making it a change, like once we actually established that it was working and then moving that from staging to production, yeah, that's when it becomes really tricky, and that there was obviously lots of layers of politics there to do all the documentation and make it come through as a change process or a minor change process. So as I said, you know, they're interested in library stuff. You know, we're all there for the student experience, so or you know, improving the student experience. So there wasn't that much. It wasn't very hard to get them on board. Yeah.
Probably kind of two different levels as well. The LTI had to be turned on in Blackboard. That took the guys about 30 minutes. Our IT staff in the library had to acquire the LTI link from Ex Libris, but once they passed it on to Blackboard, they could turn it on, but they couldn't apply it retrospectively. So we had to teach all of our academics how to embed an LTI which is the phase we're moving out of now because the Blackboard instances are coming preloaded with the link. But yeah, that was probably more than just technically actually getting it to work on Blackboard.
This is just an overall question, but has academic behaviour improved? So I come from the perspective of we've had a centralised e-reading system and they're linked at the course level into Moodle. So all of our stuff is managed and controlled and compliant. But what we are finding is that academics just chuck up non-compliant links and videos and stuff like that. So using Leganto, is that improving their behaviour or improving your tracking of their behaviour?
I think academics are driven by lack of time, so they're very time poor, and what gets them. So I think in the situation it's trying to have a combination of the carrot, as in Leganto's relatively simple to use at an individual level, and the stick with associate deans telling them they have to do this and that they do not want any more PDFs attached in Moodle and things that break all sorts of compliance laws. So, yeah, they're smart people and they'll get away with what they can get away with if it'll save them time. So it's just trying to get that combination, the right balance, so that they don't feel too imposed upon, but still do what you want them to do.
Just a quick question. Are any of you using the digitisation requests or digitisation workflow in ALMA with Leganto?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm asking because we're trialling Leganto at the moment with a number of academics, but none of them have placed a digitisation request.
We don't let the academics do it, we do it. It's how we process our workflow for digitisation.
We have the digitisation request functionality turned on in Sandbox. Because at the moment the workflow is that you put a digitised tag on a citation and then they add the note, and that's driving me insane. So many things tagged as digitised. When you ring someone up and go, well, you didn't tell us what you wanted, and they said, well, I didn't know what digitised meant anyway. So I really want a button that someone can click to go, what I mean is I want a digitisation request and this is the information and I know what it is that I'm doing. So we've got it turned on in Sandbox because we're still just trying to see what that looks like in ALMA. If we can't read it in ALMA, then we don't like to ultimately gain anything. Anybody else have?
We do, as I said, because we do all the processing, we don't really need to make a digital request because we're working from a reading list. So we're doing it ourselves, yeah.
So we definitely do. The academic has to place a digitisation request through reading lists. We won't accept it in any other way, but we're still doing the digitisation note workflow. That's the workflow. That's the current Ex Libris workflow. So that's the one that we're doing quite a lot that way.
It does work. One of the things we found is we use the tag, is that the academics think they want to scan the whole book anyhow. So our thing is, don't use the tag, we're never going to digitise it for you. We don't get many who don't say what they want because the citation has the information. Yes. So my guys do need to look around for it. But it does work, and it kind of reduced the amount of scanning we do. Because I kind of think academics think that people always need to have it electronically. Well, if they've picked the actual print book themselves, kind of has a consequence. So we always replace a print book with the e-book, no matter what the academic says.
Yeah.
So you do get it over by using that.
I think uploaded files also reduced the amount of digitisation that we needed to create because the academic was actually giving us the electronic file. And unless it was really poor quality, just use what they've given us rather than send another staff member away to make it. So we made some gains on that front as well.
Hi, so when you said that you were had the digital files, did you have them loaded up into the digital inventory So they were representations that you then link the citations to?
No, the way our legacy system worked is that we created a cataloguing record in the metadata editor, and we linked a portfolio to a digital file that is locally hosted on some Curtin drives. So
you're not using ALMA yet?
No, not yet.
We use ALMA for our readings, so we actually create an individual ALMA digital record for our readings. We don't attach it to the representation, to the print record. So we actually have a separate record, so we're able to overcome the problem of having multiple readings on the same print record for different courses. We're also able to overcome the problem of suppressing the big record. We also do it where we have the big record being viewed, but the representation, we use access rights to say it's not available in a course at the moment. So that's how we're doing it. But with the copyright, we're actually thinking we're going to possibly be moving away from ALMA and using the whole copyright process, which is an attachment to the citation in the reading list.
Yeah.
And
So
it's only seen by that reading list.
Right, okay, so you haven't started copyright module yet?
Nobody has started copyright because unfortunately it always seems to come right as you're about to start the session, and it's kind of like, I can't change my workflows now.
Right.
So I think we're not even going to implement it for session 2 because the next big change is happening in June, and that's way too late for us to make processing changes.
Oh, thank you.
Please step Meredith, Tracey, and
Do you have an architect with the staff member working with you, like similar to ALMA implementation? Or?
Yeah, there's a project person that gets assigned, and you have sort of weekly meetings, obviously by teleconference because they do it from Israel. And then they'll just take you through until you're sort of ready to go, you go live, and then we're still in that post go live, I guess, and from their point of view, we haven't launched obviously at USC, but from their point of view, because we've got the implementation with Blackboard happening, we've basically gone live, so they're just having sort of catch-up calls, which I had one last week to say how's it going, and they're looking at our usage stats as well to say is this the pattern that we were expecting, and I was sort of saying because it's so new for us as well and new for the students, so there's ongoing discussions and they're very keen to get the feedback. So I actually sent the feedback that we had done via the Google form from the students that's obviously de-identified to say I'm happy to send that because they're keen to see how the students are reacting to Leganto in terms of development as well.
So they have a project plan as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks again.